Thank
you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I rise to support this bill and primarily speak about access to cash and therefore my support for the Lords Amendments 72 to 77. Now, I've spoken many times in this place about banking provisions. I brought in the 10-minute rule bill on banking services post offices bill, which the government didn't end up taking up. And I've said time and time again in this place that the UK is not ready to go cashless. And that is why I'm particularly pleased with the provisions in this bill. And the reason for that is manifold. The elderly, the vulnerable, and particularly those living in rural locations like mine of North Norfolk simply rely on cash. And I think I can speak for many members in the chamber on that. And if you don't believe me, you only have to look at what the Access to Cash group have said in their research, that 5 million adults would struggle without access to cash. And often, those are the people who are on the lowest incomes and the tightest budgets. We'll certainly give them.
I thank the honourable member for giving way. He can add to that list residents in my own constituency of Aberconway who have seen the banks withdraw first from the market towns to the coast and then from coastal towns along the coast. A withdrawal that's only been matched by their move online. So does he agree with me that this is a good move by the government and will be welcomed by many, specifically because it retains that access to cash in societies, communities and amongst demographics for whom cash is a crucial part of their everyday life?
I'm very happy to agree with the honourable member, but I want to go even further than that, because particularly in rural areas and coastal areas that he mentions, which is indeed the case in North Norfolk, that access to cash is just not good enough. Yes, the provisions are there within this bill, but we have to go even further. And that's why I want to really talk about the disgraceful attitude, Mr Deputy Speaker, of the banks, and actually what we can do further about this with the advent of banking hubs. Because really, since 1988, we have seen some 14,000 bank branches shut across the United Kingdom. And there are approximately only 6,000 left today. And what is even more worrying is the acceleration at which these are being shut. We heard the Shadow Minister say that 54 branches every single month continue to be closed. And that is a particular worry with that accelerating trend. So in my view, there is an absolute lack of corporate social responsibility from the big banks today. Given that the UK taxpayer bailed them out in 2008 with such a high number that actually it's extremely difficult to ascertain what that is, in some cases up to £1 trillion, then to not give a hoot about the people that are affected in these communities, I think is particularly poor. Now, in my constituency, Lloyds Bank, which announced about a month ago that they were going to embark on another range of closures, are going to close not just one bank branch, but two. I can't even begin to put into words how upset my constituents are about that. I've had countless emails. So both in Cromer, which is on the North Norfolk coast and visited by many thousands of tourists, and then furthermore inland, North Walsham, another town, they will suffer a Lloyds Bank closure, each respectively, and they will be left with one bank in the town.
Will my honourable friend weigh on that?
Oh, of course.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. Does he also agree that when we question why the banks are closing and that we ask them for the evidence and they supply it, that some banks are actually using evidence from during the pandemic when obviously the banks were closed and not many people were able to access the banks?
Well, my honourable member makes an extremely important point. So much of this research has been conducted over a window when, of course, footfall was incredibly low because the pandemic meant that we weren't able to go out and use our high streets the same way. And they have, I think, used that data to help extrapolate the views and the opinions that they want to then go and close these branches. And I think that goes to the real root of actually what they are doing at the moment. What these branches are then doing is saying, quite simply, don't worry, you can go online, there'll be a community banker to help you, and of course you can then go and use your local post office. Well, we know in so many communities up and down the land that that just is not appropriate. Take my constituency, I have the oldest cohort of individuals in the entire country. 1/3 of people are over the age of 65. In some of these coastal towns, the vast majority of my constituents cannot just go online because in so many cases they are in their 70s plus, and it is just not appropriate what the suggestions are. So, how can a community, when there's 8,000 people in Cromer, 13,000 people in North Walsham, be left with just one bank? And of course, the other thing that is not taken into consideration is what the expansion of these towns are. If you take North Walsham, in our local plan, they will see at least another 2,500 approximately homes being built over the next decade. The banks take no account whatsoever of the increase in populations and therefore factor those into their numbers. So banking hubs are often given as one of the answers. And there are others. There's a notable case in Frome in Somerset where they used a similar sort of scheme to a banking hub, slightly different, which was also reasonably successful. But the big issue with all of this, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is the regulations around how you get a banking hub. And I think we can already see that it's not working as well as it should be if we've only had 6 that have opened so far. Because at the moment, you have to wait until the last bank in town shuts before you're eligible in that criteria to potentially have a hub. Now, to me, that rigidity of that structure doesn't work. You've got different sized towns, you've got different sized populations, you've got different age cohorts, you've got towns that are miles away from the nearest bank to be able to go move to. So clearly, as I just said, how on earth can certain towns be using that rigid structure? It doesn't seem right to me, and I would really ask the Minister if he would keep it under review on how this banking hub situation run in conjunction with Link is being operated. It does seem that it's not working as well. Now, look, the Minister is a really good man. He has met with me many, many times to talk about this, and he is certainly in listening mode. He can do a lot better than taking my old Post Office Services Bill and dusting it off and having a look at that. And one of the principle in that bill was that actually look at the post office network. It's 11,500 strong footprint. I don't think we invest enough in it, but there is a way that instead of having a sweetheart deal between the government and the banking institutions, let's put it regulated, proper legislation to say that we use our post office network, invest in it as the real future. So many of those could be banking hubs. It would give real solidity to the market and help many hard-working postmasters know what their future would be. One of my last points is that DLUC is sitting on £150 million for community ownership funds. Well, why can't we have a special provision in there that we give planning permission to buildings that can be used as banking hubs? Again, we could further accelerate the rollout of these hubs. Look, there's a bit of food for thought there. I want to now just close my remarks and say thank you to the Minister for listening to me. Please look at our banking hubs and the way that's working. I think we can do a lot better job with it. Thank you.